I've been in some pretty odd and interesting places in our search for origins, but this is a unique experience. Crawling along one of the galleries of a Neolithic flint mine. Because if you want to see Europe's biggest and best preserved flint mine, you have to come here to Przemianki in southeast Poland. And today we begin our Polish edition of Origins here in the mine shafts and galleries that Stone Age man worked 5,000 years ago. John Howell of St John's College, Oxford, a prehistorian who specialises in Eastern European archaeology, is with me in this gallery. And I suppose it's true to say, John, that it's hardly changed since man first came down here about 3000 BC.
Apart from the slight bit of restoration work behind you back there, I think that...
Oh, yes.
Yes, just to make the entrance safe for you to come through. The rest of this is exactly as it was when the last basketful of flint was removed.
It's an extraordinary sight, isn't it? We seem to be in a sort of central lobby here, and these passages are going off all around us.
Yes, well, we've just come down to about 30 feet below the ground through one of about 1,000 shafts on this mine. And you can see before you there that the passage goes off into the distance for about 30 meters. And at the far end of that, it will break into a chamber about 12 meters by 8 and perhaps a meter high if you're lucky. But we can't get through to that at the moment because it's blocked.
Look at these pillars here. It's almost as if one were in the crypt of an ancient church. Almost if those pillars had been architecturally designed.
Well, that pillar, Malcolm, is one that's been left naturally after the flint has been taken out. But if you look behind you, you'll see that that pillar is made up of pure rubble. Instead of removing the limestone that is next to the flint, they've built it up to shore up the roof of this mine.
How sophisticated were they in the way they operated these mines?
Well, apart from this, you will probably notice that there are shafts coming down every few meters along here, about 40 by 30 centimeters, to keep the ventilation going.
Now, how did they work these mines? What sort of tools did they have, for example?
The tools they used were antler shovels and antler levers to get the flint out of the limestone, and heavy hammers made out of the flint that's coming from southwest Poland, from the Silesian region.
Let's go further into the mine. You lead the way down that passage there, and we'll see if we can see any evidence of where they were working. Are you all right there?
Yes, the lamp is holding out quite well.
Good. John Howell has a miner's helmet with a lamp on it, which is lighting his way through this passageway, and I'm crawling along behind him. We've come now into
Malcolm,
another gallery.
Let's stop here. Look, you see on the roof of this the remains of the charcoal. These galleries were lit by charcoal lamps. If you lie back and look up at the roof of this part of the gallery, you can see the remains of the charcoal from the charcoal lamps.
Oh, yes.
These aren't particularly impressive examples at this part of the gallery, but some of them are in the shape of hands, and there are even illustrations of chairs and crosses and other geometric designs.
So they were doodling here while they were waiting for their shift to begin?
Yes.
And what sort of flint were they getting out of here?
Well, this is a particularly fine and beautiful flint. If we look at a piece over here, you can see that it's formed of concentric rings. On the outside it's brown, and then goes through white into grey in the centre.
And when this is polished, it looks rather good as a finished tool.
Extremely fine, and was clearly a prestige goods. Its distribution is absolutely immense, from the Baltic coast of the Soviet Union in the northeast, right down to Czechoslovakia in the southwest. And from east to west, it occurs in the Ukraine, right through to East Germany.
And what particular tools were they making out of it?
Well, because of the banded nature of this flint, it's absolutely useless for making blades out of.
Why is that?
Because the flint will not fracture in the way that other flint will fracture into easy blades. So what they're making out of this are very neat axes, either trapezoidal or rectangular in shape, with square butts.
Now, these shafts and galleries and chambers along this seam of flint have been explored by archaeologists since the 1920s, haven't they? So there's been a good deal of work. But not only down here, they've also looked at the environment around the mines to find associated settlements. What did they discover?
Well, immediately outside this shaft, there would have been small collections of groups of workers hewing the flint into approximate shapes to be carted off to the local settlement. Now, at the beginning of this mine, that lies about 10 kilometers away at a town called Śmielów.
That seems a long way to cart the flint.
Yes, but it's just downriver.
What did they find at these settlements when they excavated there?
Well, the most exciting find at this settlement was the age of the cattle, which were younger than at any other site of this period. And the excavator, Professor Wyszlansky, has suggested that what we see here is axes being exchanged for young cattle.
I'm not sure that I could stand too much of this. That's part of the problem. One isn't standing, of course. It's this crawling along that is so uncomfortable and so tiring. I don't suppose many people come down here, John.
Very few people come into these galleries. A large number of people come to visit the site now. And indeed, there's a museum built outside, started in about 1964, when the site was given museum status.
In fact, outside of Poland, not a great deal has been published about these mines.
That is one of the unfortunate things about the excavations here. They've all been in Polish, and indeed many of them haven't been published very well at all.
We're getting towards the shaft now that will take us up to ground level again. I'm fed up with having my head thumped on the ceiling of this wretched tunnel we're crawling along. But John, before we reach the end of this fascinating tour, tell us, how did Neolithic man discover this seam 20 or 30 feet under the ground in the first place?
Well, some of the flint occurs as loose pieces, geologically loose pieces in the surface. And the first phase of this mine seems to have been a type of open cast mining, which then led down to the seam about 10 meters below the surface.
Although I've been complaining about conditions down here, it really is very exciting, isn't it?
It's one of the most exciting places I ever visited.
And that was my own impression too. It made me feel closer to Neolithic man than any other site or artifact has ever done. In fact, Poland came up with many archaeological surprises in view of what we in the West know of its past. Not the least the trampling back and forth of the armies of Europe for 1,000 years or more. Above and below ground, there's a high priority being given just now to archaeology and the restoration of historical and prehistoric sites. Cities like Warsaw and Krakow have largely been restored since the last World War, with great skill and sensitivity for their historical past. The provincial city of Zamość in eastern Poland, about 50 kilometers from the Russian border, is a model example of the country's concern for restoring its earlier architectural gems. Miraculously, this Renaissance city has survived intact through many turbulent centuries and stands today as a unique monument in Eastern Europe. It was the concept of a Polish aristocrat called Zamość, who in 1580 brought in an army of craftsmen and a Venetian architect to build a new town on his estate to his own design. The focal point is the town square, made up of elaborately decorated merchants' houses, all connected by arcades at street level. An impressive piece of town planning which John Howell and I were there to explore.
I think one has got to understand that before Zamość had the idea of building this town, there was absolutely nothing here. And he decided that he would have a town for two reasons. The first one was that as he was Chancellor to the King Stephen of Poland, it would be a good idea to have a centre that reflected his own political power. But secondly, he was also influenced by North Italian ideas of the philosophy of building a town in which the parts balanced each other, a centre for spiritual side, a centre for the academic side, a centre for the defence side.
Aren't these merchants' houses impressive? The ones that front onto the square here. Look, this one we're standing in front of now, with its very ornate facade.
Yes.
And then this lovely stucco work a little lower down, and the colour, that colour's Pompeii red, isn't it?
Yes, and this one here is a very bright blue, and while at the far end, on the house with the elaborate stucco work round the second floor windows, that's a very bright green. These colours are original. A great deal of trouble has been taken to check these against contemporary reports of what the buildings looked like, and to check them against the sort of colour scheme that one finds in the North Italian pattern books.
What condition were they in before the restorers started work?
Well, I think if we go off down this street, just in the corner of the square, we'll be able to see a building on which the restoration work has not been undertaken, and if you can see, it butts up against this bright yellow one here, so you've got a before and after shot.
Yes, that's pretty shabby, isn't it? As we approach it now, you can see how the plaster's come off the brickwork on the arches there.
You can see also that the walls are covered by this thick, matty, grey-green fungus, which was the original reason for the reconstruction, as it was eroding away the elaborate stucco.
They must be throwing a lot of people into this. The workforce must be enormous doing a job like this in an entire city.
There are several hundred professionals, which would include art historians, architectural historians, plus the craftsmen who are reshaping the designs of the stucco work and also making bricks, because you can see here, right by the side of this door, that this very bright red brickwork that is peering through is modern. When this building has finished its reconstruction, this will be entirely removed, and bricks made to the original design of the building will have been inserted in its place.
And then they'll put plaster over that.
So
we won't even see the bricks.
That's true. This will be entirely plastered and painted in its original colours.
I know that archaeologists have been swarming around this town, although it seems to be an architectural job, a restoration and architectural job that's going on. So what part have they been playing?
In the centre of the town, almost every single building has been excavated.
Why is that?
To see whether the buildings are resting on their original foundations and to try to get some picture of the history of the building, whether the walls have collapsed at some point, the building burnt down, and to see what alterations have been made in the design of the rooms and the structure of the fabric.
In fact, what are they finding?
Very little. There are one or two minor alterations, the insertion of stairs here and there, the putting in of a partition wall, and then its removal again as the family needs grew larger.
I think what we've seen here is astounding in its scale and the detail that the Restoration Service has been working with here. And I believe that so much expertise has now been built up in Poland that they're exporting some of their people and some of their ideas to other parts of Europe.
Well, the Polish Restoration Service consists of about 23 divisions, ranging from the art historian and the architectural historian down to carpentry and to the reconstruction of furniture to match the reconstructions of the interior, the walls and the plasterwork. And this has enabled a great body of skill to be built up. One of the few examples in Europe where the old crafts are being maintained for this purpose. And so the Polish Restoration Service has been doing work in Scandinavia down to North Italy, most impressively at Venice and on the Leaning Tower at Pisa.
Further east from Zamość, and only a kilometre or two from the Soviet border, archaeologists have just located a site of great importance. It was discovered during a foot survey in the open fields of rich agricultural farmland, where a few unprepossessing humps and bumps in the flat landscape have turned out to be full of surprises.
The site can be described in two ways. First of all, it is a great commercial centre and lies at the crossroads of two very important routes. The first is from the east to the west, linking the Ukraine and Russia with the rest of Poland. But the most important from the archaeological point of view is its position on the amber route between the Baltic and the eastern Mediterranean, and especially the Eastern Empire.